The first sound Adise Okafor heard every morning was not a rooster or birds in the mango trees. It was the quiet splash of the river against the old wooden canoe tied outside her crumbling mud house. Long before sunrise, while the rest of the village slept beneath patched roofs, Adise was already awake and preparing to fight for another day. At 23, she had become used to mornings that began in darkness. She rose carefully from the raffia mat she shared with her elderly mother, Mama Goy, trying not to wake her. Their one-room home smelled of firewood and dried fish. Cracks ran through the mud walls, and whenever heavy rain came, water leaked through the roof and forced them to move their bedding across the floor. Poverty had followed Adise for most of her life, but the river had taught her how to survive. Her father had once been one of the strongest fishermen in the village. Before a violent storm took his life when she was 14, he taught her how to paddle through dangerous currents, repair torn nets, and recognize the places where fish gathered beneath the surface. The villagers laughed at him for teaching those skills to a girl. While other daughters learned sewing, cooking, and hair braiding, Adise learned to control a canoe in rough water and pull heavy nets with bare hands. "A girl belongs in the kitchen," they whispered. "Who teaches his daughter to become a fisherman?" Her father had only smiled. "The river does not care whether your hands belong to a man or a woman. It rewards hard work." Those words stayed with Adise long after he was gone. That morning, she wrapped a faded cloth around her waist, pulled on an old sleeveless blouse that had been repaired more times than she could count, and stepped barefoot into the cold air. She believed she was heading toward another exhausting day on the river. She had no idea that before sunset, one act of courage would bring a powerful stranger into her life and change the fate of her family forever. The moon still hung above the quiet river, casting silver reflections across the calm water. She picked up the heavy fishing net that leaned against the wall. Most women struggled to lift it. Adise carried it effortlessly over one shoulder. Years of labor had shaped her body in ways many people considered unusual for a woman. Her arms were thick with muscle. Her shoulders were broad from rowing for hours every day. Even her hands were rough and scarred from countless encounters with ropes, hooks, and stubborn fish. Many people said she looked more like a wrestler than a lady. Some even joked that she frightened the fish before catching them. Adise ignored such comments the best she could, though each one left a tiny wound inside her heart. She reached the riverbank where her old canoe waited. The canoe had belonged to her father. It was old now. The wood creaked whenever she stepped inside. Several places had been repaired with rough wooden patches, but it remained sturdy enough to carry her across the river. She untied the rope, climbed in, and pushed away from the shore. The paddle cut smoothly through the water. The silence of the river comforted her. Unlike people, the river never judged her appearance. The fish never mocked her muscles. The morning breeze never laughed because her palms were rough. Out there on the water, she felt free. As dawn slowly approached, orange light spread across the horizon. Birds began flying above the river while mist floated gently over the surface. Adise reached one of her favorite fishing spots. She stood inside the canoe with remarkable balance. Taking a deep breath, she lifted the enormous fishing net above her head. The weight would have forced many people to stumble. Instead, she swung it gracefully through the air. The net spread wide before falling into the water with a loud splash. She smiled. "No matter what people say," she whispered to herself, "the river still provides." For several hours, she worked tirelessly. She paddled from one location to another. She pulled in heavy nets filled with tilapia, catfish, and mudfish. Each time, she hauled the dripping net back into the canoe. Her muscles tightened beneath her dark skin. Sweat rolled down her forehead despite the cool morning breeze. By the time the sun rose fully into the sky, the canoe was nearly overflowing with fish. It had been a good day. She thanked God quietly before steering the canoe back toward the village. As she approached the shore, several fishermen were already unloading their own catch. Some nodded politely, others simply ignored her. A few younger men chuckled as she dragged the heavy canoe onto the sand without asking for help. One of them, Emma, folded his arms. "I've never seen a woman who enjoys doing a man's work so much." His friends laughed loudly. Another added, "Maybe she's waiting for a husband strong enough to carry her instead." More laughter followed. Adise pretended not to hear them. She had learned that silence often protected her peace better than arguments. She lifted a large basket overflowing with fish onto her head. The basket was so heavy that many of the men watching would have needed assistance. Adise balanced it effortlessly and began walking toward the village market. Children playing along the dusty road spotted her first. There goes Iron Woman. No, she's stronger than my father. My mother said, no man will marry someone with muscles like that. The children burst into laughter. Although they were only repeating what they heard from adults, the words still hurt. Adise forced herself to smile at them. They were too young to understand how deeply words could cut. The market gradually came alive as traders arranged vegetables, fruits, spices, and woven baskets. Women dressed in colorful wrappers greeted one another cheerfully. As soon as Adise entered carrying her basket of fish, conversations shifted. There she is, the village wrestler. I heard she lifted an entire canoe yesterday. Imagine marrying someone who could beat her husband. Laughter rippled across the market. Adise quietly arranged her fish on a wooden table. She cleaned them carefully and displayed them neatly. She had learned that good presentation attracted customers regardless of gossip. Not long afterward, her first customer arrived. It was an elderly widow named Mama Adise. The old woman smiled warmly. My daughter, your fish always look fresh. Adise returned the smile. I caught them before sunrise. Mama Adise searched inside her wrapper for money but frowned sadly. I only have enough for half. Without hesitation, Ad selected several large fish and placed them inside the old woman's basket. This is enough. Mama Adise looked surprised. But I didn't pay for all these. You'll pay another day. Tears gathered in the old woman's eyes. God will reward you. Adise simply nodded. She never gave because she expected repayment. She gave because she remembered what hunger felt like. Unfortunately, kindness rarely escaped criticism. A woman standing nearby shook her head. That's why she'll remain poor. She works like a man but gives away her profits. Another replied, maybe she's trying to buy friends. They laughed. Ad continued serving customers. By midday, the sun blazed overhead. Sweat soaked her clothes. Most of her fish had been sold. She counted the money carefully. It wasn't much. After buying rice, beans, medicine for her mother, and a little cooking oil, only a few crumpled notes remained. Still, she was grateful. Some days were worse. On her way home, she passed a group of young women gathered beneath a large tree. Among them sat Chidinma. Everyone in the village admired Chidinma's beauty. She had flawless skin, expensive dresses, and long braided hair decorated with colorful beads. Many young men competed for her attention. As Adise approached, Chidinma smiled, not kindly, but mockingly. Oh look, she announced loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. Our village strongman is back. The women burst into laughter. One covered her mouth. I almost mistook her for one of the fishermen. Another added, if she keeps growing muscles, she'll soon have a beard. More laughter erupted. Chidinma looked Adise up and down. Tell us honestly, when was the last time a man even looked at you? The women laughed even harder. Adise stopped walking. For a brief moment, silence filled the air. She could have responded. She could have reminded them that she spent her days providing for her family instead of sitting beneath trees discussing people. She could have insulted them back. Instead, she smiled gently. I hope all of you have a beautiful afternoon. She continued walking. Behind her, the laughter resumed. None of them noticed the tears threatening to fall from her eyes. By the time she reached home, she had wiped them away. Mama and sat outside weaving a basket. Her wrinkled face brightened when she saw her daughter. Welcome home. Adise placed the food items inside the house before helping her mother stand. How are you feeling today? A little stronger. Ad knew it wasn't entirely true. Her mother's joints had grown weaker with age. The medicine helped, but not enough. Still, Mom and Goy always smiled. While preparing dinner over the firewood stove, Adise remained unusually quiet. Her mother noticed immediately. What happened? Nothing, Adise. The older woman smiled knowingly. I carried you for 9 months. I know when your heart is heavy, Adise. They laughed again. Mom and Goy stirred the soup slowly. What did they say today? The usual, that I look like a man, that no one will marry me, that I'm ugly. They laughed because I'm strong. For several moments, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled softly. Finally, Mom and Goy reached across the small wooden stool and held her daughter's rough hands. Look at these hands. Adise lowered her eyes. They're rough. They're hardworking. They fed this family. They paid for my medicine. They built our life. Mama and smiled gently. Never be ashamed of honest work, but sometimes it hurts. I know. I pretend it doesn't, but it does. Mama Ngoy squeezed her daughter's hands. People often fear what is different. They judge with their eyes instead of their hearts. The same people laughing today may one day wish they had your strength, your kindness, or your courage. Adise gave a weak smile. I just wish someone could see me for who I really am. They will. Her mother looked toward the darkening sky. And when that person comes, they won't care whether your hands are soft. They'll care that your heart is. After dinner, Ad stepped outside. The stars glittered above the quiet village. The river reflected the moonlight just as it had every night since she was a little girl. She sat on an old wooden bench beside the house. The cool breeze brushed against her face. She thought about the insults, the laughter, the loneliness. She wondered if her mother was only trying to comfort her. Would any man truly look beyond her appearance? Would anyone ever see the gentle heart hidden beneath years of hard labor? She didn't know. What she did know was that tomorrow morning she would wake before sunrise once again. She would paddle her father's canoe. She would cast her nets into the river. She would work honestly. She would care for her mother. She would choose kindness even when others chose cruelty. Unknown to Ad, far away in the glittering city of Lagos, a wealthy man who had grown tired of fake smiles and selfish hearts was preparing to leave behind his luxurious world in search of something money could never buy. Neither of them knew it yet, but destiny had already begun to weave their paths together, and before long, the same village that mocked the poor fisherwoman would witness a story that would change their lives forever. The morning sun rose over the glittering skyline of Lagos, bathing rows of towering glass buildings in golden light. Luxury cars flowed through the busy streets like polished jewels while helicopters crossed the sky, carrying executives to meetings worth millions of dollars. At the very top of one of the tallest buildings in Victoria Island stood the headquarters of Williams Global Holdings, a company whose influence stretched far beyond the borders of Nigeria. The company owned cargo ships that crossed oceans. Luxury hotels welcomed guests from every continent. Its technology firms employed thousands of people. Its real estate developments transformed skylines across Africa. The man behind the empire was 1-year-old Ethan Williams. To the world, Ethan was the perfect example of success. Magazine covers called him Africa's most eligible billionaire. Business newspapers praised his intelligence and vision. Television stations competed for exclusive interviews. Social media users admired his expensive suits, private jets, yachts, and luxury cars. Many young men dreamed of becoming like him. Many young women dreamed of marrying him, but none of them truly knew him. Inside his spacious office, Ethan stood quietly beside a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, yet there was no excitement on his face as he watched the city awaken below. His assistant, Grace, entered carrying a tablet. "Good morning, sir." "Good morning, Grace. You have a meeting with investors from London in 30 minutes. He nodded. "The governor called this morning. I'll return the call later. You've also been invited to 3 charity galas, 2 award ceremonies, and another television interview." Grace paused before continuing. "And your mother reminded me to remind you about tonight's dinner." Ethan smiled faintly. "My mother never gives up." Grace laughed softly. "She says, 'You're working too much.'" "I'm trying." Grace hesitated. "There's one more thing." She placed a glossy magazine on his desk. The front page showed Ethan standing beside a glamorous actress at a charity event held 2 nights earlier. The headline read, "Billionaire Ethan Williams finally finds love. Decide heavily. We spoke for less than 10 minutes." Grace shrugged. "The media doesn't need facts. They only need headlines." Ethan tossed the magazine aside. He had grown tired of stories invented about his private life. "Cancel every interview this month." Grace nodded. "Yes, sir." As she left, Ethan looked around his enormous office. Italian marble floors, original paintings worth millions, handcrafted furniture imported from Europe. Everything money could buy surrounded him. Yet the room felt painfully empty. He remembered a different time. Years ago, before Williams Global Holdings became one of Africa's largest business empires, life had been much simpler. His father, Richard Williams, had built the company through determination and discipline. From childhood, Ethan had been taught that wealth came with responsibility. Money is a tool. His father often said it can build lives or destroy them. Ethan had taken those words seriously. He expanded the family business honestly, refusing shortcuts or corruption. His success earned him respect across the business world. Unfortunately, it also attracted people who cared more about his fortune than his heart. The first woman he truly loved had been Isabella. They met during university in England before Ethan became famous. Back then, she claimed she admired his ambition and kindness. They dated for nearly 3 years. Ethan believed she would become his wife. One evening, while planning a surprise proposal, he accidentally overheard Isabella speaking with her friend. "I don't actually love Ethan." Her words froze him where he stood. "I stayed because I knew he'd become rich. What if someone wealthier comes along?" Her friend laughed. "Then I'll upgrade." The two women laughed together. Ethan quietly walked away without confronting her. The next morning, he ended the relationship. She cried. She apologized. She insisted he had misunderstood, but he had heard enough. Months later, she married a wealthy politician nearly twice her age. That betrayal left a wound that never fully healed. Years passed. He focused on work. He convinced himself he no longer needed love. Then came another relationship. This time with Vanessa. She was intelligent, elegant, successful. Everything seemed perfect, at least at first. She encouraged him to attend more public events. She posted romantic photographs online. She constantly spoke about their future together. But Ethan gradually noticed something strange. Every conversation somehow returned to money. She wanted expensive gifts, luxury vacations, designer jewelry, exclusive memberships. Whenever he suggested spending quiet time together without cameras, she suddenly became unavailable. One evening, Grace entered his office looking uncomfortable. "Sir, what is it? I think you should see this." She showed him a video spreading rapidly across social media. Vanessa sat on a podcast, smiling confidently. The interviewer asked, "Why do you think Ethan Williams loves you so much?" Vanessa laughed. "When you're dating Africa's richest bachelor, life becomes very easy." The audience laughed. She continued, "I mean, who wouldn't want this lifestyle?" Ethan watched silently. She wasn't talking about him, she was talking about his money. Their relationship ended that same week. Since then, every new introduction felt exactly the same. Some women memorized details about his businesses before meeting him. Others pretended to enjoy his hobbies simply to impress him. A few secretly recorded conversations, hoping to sell them to gossip blogs. One woman accepted a diamond necklace from him on Friday. By Monday, she was engaged to another billionaire. Another cried dramatically whenever Ethan refused to buy extravagant gifts. His wealth had become a magnet. Unfortunately, it attracted mostly the wrong people. Later that afternoon, Ethan attended the investors' meeting. The presentation was flawless. Contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars were signed. Everyone congratulated him. Champagne bottles popped. Photographers smiled. Executives applauded. Yet, Ethan felt nothing. That evening, he drove to his parents' mansion instead of attending another glamorous event. His mother, Evelyn Williams, welcomed him warmly. "My son." She hugged him tightly. "You've lost weight." He laughed. "You say that every time because it's always true." They entered the dining room where Richard Williams already sat reading business reports. His father looked up. "You survived another week." "Barely." Dinner was simple despite the family's enormous wealth. Richard believed expensive food was unnecessary during the meal. Evelyn watched her son carefully. "You've become quieter." "I'm just tired." "No." She shook her head gently. "You're lonely." Ethan looked down at his plate. "I'm fine." His father folded his newspaper. "You know lying has never suited you." Silence filled the room. Finally, Ethan spoke. "How do you know when someone truly loves you?" His parents exchanged knowing glances. Richard leaned back. "When your mother married me, I owned 1 truck." Evelyn laughed. "And it barely worked. We couldn't afford a proper house. We shared 1 small apartment. There were months when paying rent felt impossible." Richard smiled at his wife. She stayed. Evelyn nodded. "When success finally came, nothing changed between us." She looked directly at Ethan. "The right person falls in love with your character before your possessions. But how do I know who that person is?" Richard answered quietly. "Remove the possessions." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" "When people know you're rich, they immediately begin acting. They become whoever they think you want. You'll never know whether their kindness is genuine." Ethan thought carefully. His father continued. "If you really want to find someone who loves the man rather than the billionaire," he paused, "then stop introducing yourself as a billionaire. Those words remained in Ethan's mind long after dinner ended. Later that night, he sat alone on the balcony, overlooking the city lights. Thousands of windows glowed beneath the dark sky. Somewhere among millions of people, surely there had to be someone who valued honesty more than luxury. Someone who wouldn't care about private jets. Someone who would still smile if he drove an old pickup truck instead of a Rolls-Royce. Someone who would see Ethan Williams. The man, not Ethan Williams, the billionaire. His phone vibrated. Another message. Another invitation. Another woman introducing herself online. He locked the phone without reading it. For the first time in years, he wanted silence. The following morning, Ethan surprised everyone at company headquarters. He entered the executive boardroom where senior directors waited for the weekly strategy meeting. "I'll be taking a short leave." The room became silent. One director blinked. "A leave?" "Yes." "For how long?" "I'm not sure." The executives looked confused. Grace herself appeared shocked. "But sir, the company is stable. You all know your responsibilities." Richard, who also sat on the board, smiled quietly. He had expected this announcement. One director cleared his throat. "Are you traveling abroad?" "No." "Then where are you going?" Ethan smiled. "I honestly don't know." The room fell silent again. After the meeting, Grace followed him to his office. "You've never taken a vacation." "I know. You deserve one." He nodded. "But promise me something. Anything. Don't tell anyone where I am." She smiled. "I'll guard the secret." Over the next 2 days, Ethan made careful preparations. His luxury watches remained locked away. Designer suits stayed inside his wardrobe. He chose ordinary jeans, simple shirts, and worn sneakers. He rented an old pickup truck under another name. Even his expensive phone was replaced with a basic one. He shaved his beard slightly differently and wore a simple baseball cap. Looking into the mirror, he almost laughed. For the first time in years, nobody would recognize Africa's famous billionaire. He felt strangely free. Before leaving Lagos, he visited his parents one final time. Evelyn hugged him tightly. "Be careful, I will." Richard handed him a small leather notebook. "What's this?" "My travel journal." "You kept journals for 20 years. Ethan smiled. "I never knew." "You'll understand why after your journey." He placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Success teaches many lessons, but ordinary people often teach the greatest ones." Early the next morning, before the city became busy, Ethan quietly drove away. No convoy followed him. No security vehicles. No photographers. No flashing cameras. Just an ordinary pickup truck disappearing along the highway. He passed bustling towns, green forests, and quiet villages where children waved happily at passing vehicles. For the first time in many years, nobody treated him differently. Nobody recognized his face. Nobody asked for selfies. Nobody mentioned billions of naira. The freedom felt refreshing. Several hours later, as the highway stretched endlessly ahead, Ethan smiled to himself. He had no destination, no carefully planned itinerary. Only one hope filled his heart. Somewhere beyond the luxury hotels, skyscrapers, and glamorous parties was a genuine person whose heart could not be bought. He did not know that fate had already chosen the place where that search would end. In a quiet riverside village, a hard-working young fisherwoman named Adise would wake before dawn the following morning, completely unaware that destiny was slowly guiding a lonely billionaire toward the river that had shaped her entire life. Soon, two people from completely different worlds would meet, not because of wealth or status, but because kindness has a remarkable way of drawing hearts together when the time is right. The first rays of sunlight stretched across the river as Adise dipped her paddle into the calm water. A thin layer of morning mist floated over the surface, giving the river an almost magical appearance. The familiar rhythm of paddling soothed her mind, but it could not erase the painful memories of the previous day's mockery. She had cried silently before going to bed, not because she believed the cruel words spoken about her, but because deep inside she sometimes wondered if everyone else could somehow see something about her that she could not. She looked down at her rough hands gripping the paddle. Her palms were covered with calluses. Her fingers bore tiny scars from fishing hooks and years of pulling heavy ropes. Her broad shoulders ached from lifting baskets that many men in the village struggled to carry. She had sacrificed her softness to survive, and survival had become more important than beauty. She sighed. "There is no time to feel sorry for yourself," she whispered. "The river is waiting." She smiled to herself and continued paddling toward her favorite fishing grounds. As always, the river welcomed her without judgment. Birds glided gracefully above the water. Fish occasionally leaped from the surface before disappearing again. The gentle breeze cooled her face as the canoe rocked peacefully. This was where she felt closest to her late father. She remembered his deep voice teaching her when she was only a little girl. The river respects patience. Never rush it. Treat it kindly and it will feed you. She closed her eyes briefly. I miss you, Papa. Then she cast her enormous fishing net into the river. The heavy net spread beautifully before sinking beneath the water. Hours passed quickly. By mid-morning, Ad had caught more fish than she expected. She thanked God quietly as she arranged them neatly inside her canoe. Mother will be happy today. She turned the canoe toward the village. Unknown to her, several kilometers away, Ethan Williams was driving slowly along a narrow rural road. It had been 3 days since he left Lagos. For the first time in years, nobody recognized him. Nobody asked for business advice. Nobody requested photographs. Nobody wanted favors. He felt surprisingly peaceful. His old rented pickup truck rattled over potholes as he admired the countryside. Children chased goats across open fields. Women carried baskets of vegetables toward nearby markets. Farmers worked beneath the hot sun without complaining. Life here moved differently. People smiled more. They seemed less hurried. Although they possessed far less than those living in the city, they somehow appeared richer in spirit. Ethan smiled. Perhaps his father had been right. Perhaps genuine happiness still existed far away from luxury and fame. His thoughts were interrupted by dark clouds gathering overhead. The wind changed suddenly. Within minutes, the sky became almost black. Thunder echoed across the hills. Oh no! Large drops of rain crashed against his windshield. Soon, the gentle rain transformed into a violent downpour. The narrow dirt road became slippery. Visibility dropped dramatically. Ethan slowed the vehicle. I should find shelter. Unfortunately, before he could reach the nearby village, the pickup truck slid sideways into deep mud. The rear tires spun helplessly. Mud sprayed everywhere. The truck refused to move. He tried again. The engine roared. The wheels dug even deeper. He stopped. This isn't good. Stepping outside, he immediately sank ankle-deep into the muddy road. Rain soaked his clothes within seconds. He looked around. The village stood only a short distance away. Several people had already gathered beneath nearby shop roofs to avoid the rain. Some noticed his stranded vehicle. Instead of helping, they simply watched. One elderly man shook his head. That road always traps outsiders. Another laughed. He'll learn today. A few young men stood with folded arms. None made any effort to assist him. Ethan wasn't angry. He understood. Everyone wanted to remain dry. He walked back toward the truck and attempted to push it alone. The vehicle barely moved. He slipped. His shoes disappeared into thick mud. He laughed quietly at himself. So much for adventure. Meanwhile, Adrock, carrying a basket filled with freshly caught fish, balanced effortlessly on her head. The rain had forced many traders to seek shelter. She noticed the stranded pickup almost immediately. She also noticed the man trying unsuccessfully to free it. Without thinking twice, she placed her basket beneath a nearby tree. Several villagers watched curiously. One woman recognized her. Leave him, he'll figure it out. Adise ignored the comment. She walked directly toward Ethan. You need help? Ethan turned. Standing before him was the strongest-looking young woman he had ever seen. Rain poured over her face. Her simple wrapper clung to her muscular frame. Her hands were rough from years of labor, yet her eyes held remarkable kindness. He smiled politely. I don't want to trouble you. It's no trouble. She looked at the stuck tires. The mud is deeper on this side. You'll need someone to push while you steer. You know about vehicles? She laughed softly. No, but I know this road. Her smile caught him by surprise. It wasn't the polished smile of someone trying to impress him. It was natural, honest, warm. She walked behind the truck. Get inside. When I say go, accelerate gently. Ethan hesitated. I don't think one person can push this. She grinned. Just trust me. Something about her confidence made him obey. He climbed behind the steering wheel. Outside, Adise planted her bare feet firmly into the mud. She bent slightly, placed both hands against the truck. Now, Ethan pressed the accelerator. The wheels spun briefly. Then, to his amazement, the truck lurched forward. Ad pushed with astonishing strength. Within seconds, the pickup climbed out of the mud completely. Ethan stopped several meters ahead. He quickly jumped out. "You did it." Adise wiped rainwater from her forehead. "It wasn't difficult." He stared at her in disbelief. Most people would have struggled even with help. She had practically rescued the truck by herself. "Thank you." She smiled. "You're welcome." Ethan reached into his pocket. "Please let me give you something." She shook her head immediately. "No, you helped me. I didn't help you for money. You looked stranded. That's enough reason." Before Ethan could respond, she picked up her basket of fish. "I should go. The market closes early when it rains." She turned and began walking away. Ethan watched her leave. Something felt different. Most people he met expected something in return. She expected nothing. As the Adise walked toward the village, loud laughter suddenly erupted nearby. Several young men who had watched everything from a distance were pointing at her. One shouted loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Look at our village, strong man." Another laughed, "She should compete with wrestlers." A third added, "Who needs 10 men when we have Adise?" Everyone burst into laughter. Another woman smirked. "No wonder no man wants to marry her. She's stronger than every husband." The insults continued. Adise lowered her eyes but kept walking. She had heard these same words hundreds of times. Today they hurt no less than before. Ethan stood frozen. He looked from the laughing villagers to Ad's retreating figure. Confusion filled his mind. She had just helped a complete stranger without asking for payment. She had risked ruining her own goods in heavy rain. Yet these people mocked her. Why? What had she done wrong? He approached one of the villagers. "Why are you laughing at her?" The man chuckled. "You must be new." "I am. That's Adise. So, she's not a proper woman." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" The villager shrugged. "She fishes, rows canoes, carries loads like a man. No man wants a wife who looks stronger than him." Several others nodded in agreement. One elderly woman added, "She's hard-working, but she's unlucky. Beauty attracts husbands. Muscles scare them away." Ethan looked back toward Ad. She was already disappearing around the corner, carrying the heavy basket as though it weighed almost nothing. He found their judgment difficult to understand. Strength had become something shameful, simply because she was a woman. That evening, Ethan checked into the village's only small guest house. It was far from luxurious. The room contained a simple wooden bed. A small fan rotated lazily overhead. The bathroom consisted of a bucket and a tap. He smiled. Oddly enough, he preferred it to many expensive hotel suites. The owner, an elderly man named Papa Samuel, served him hot yam porridge for dinner. As they ate, Ethan casually asked, "Who is Ad?" Papa Samuel looked surprised. "You met her already?" "She helped me today." The old man smiled warmly. "That sounds like Adise. What kind of person is she?" Papa Samuel leaned back thoughtfully. "She's one of the kindest people I've ever known." "Really?" The old man nodded. "After her father died, she became responsible for her sick mother. She works harder than anyone in this village. She gives food to widows, pays school fees for 2 orphan children whenever she can. Sometimes she goes hungry because she has shared her own food." Ethan listened carefully, but everyone laughs at her. Papa Samuel sighed. "People judge what they see. They see muscles. They don't see sacrifices. They see rough hands. They don't see the countless lives those hands have helped." He shook his head sadly. "Our village has not always been fair to her." Ethan remained silent for a long moment. Something inside him stirred. He remembered the glamorous women who surrounded him in Lagos. Perfect makeup, expensive perfume, designer clothes. Many had spoken beautiful words. Yet few possessed the genuine kindness this fisherwoman had shown in only a few minutes. The contrast fascinated him. The next morning, Ethan decided to walk through the village before breakfast. Children ran past laughing. Market stalls gradually opened. Smoke rose from cooking fires. Life bustled peacefully. Then he spotted Adise again. She was helping an elderly fisherman repair a torn fishing net. The old man looked embarrassed. "My hands aren't as strong as they used to be." Adise smiled. "Don't worry, we'll finish before noon." She patiently tied each knot with remarkable skill. When they finished, the old fisherman tried to pay her. She refused. No. You've taught me many things over the years. Let this be my way of saying thank you. The old man's eyes became moist. May God bless you. She simply smiled and continued walking. Ethan watched everything from a distance. Nobody knew who he really was. Nobody noticed him observing quietly beneath the shade of a large tree. For the first time in many years, he wasn't impressed by someone's beauty or social status. Instead, he found himself deeply moved by a woman whom nearly everyone else overlooked. A woman whose strength had become the reason people mocked her. A woman whose kindness remained unchanged despite years of rejection. As Adise disappeared toward the river, carrying another bundle of fishing nets over her shoulder, Ethan realized something unexpected. His journey, which had begun as an escape from fake relationships and empty luxury, suddenly felt as though it had a purpose. He had come searching for genuine people. Perhaps without even realizing it, he had already found one. Neither of them could have imagined that this chance encounter on a muddy road would become the beginning of a love story that would challenge everything the village believed about beauty, wealth, and the true measure of a person's worth. The morning after their unexpected meeting, Ethan Williams woke before the village roosters announced the new day. For a few moments, he forgot where he was. The simple wooden room of Papa Samuel's guest house was nothing like the luxurious penthouse he had left behind in Lagos. There were no marble floors, no smart home system adjusting the curtains automatically, and no personal assistant waiting outside his bedroom with a neatly planned schedule. Instead, sunlight slipped through the tiny wooden window, and the fresh scent of damp earth drifted into the room after the previous day's rain. Ethan smiled. For the first time in years, he had slept peacefully. No endless phone calls, no emergency board meetings, no gossip blogs inventing stories about his love life, only silence. He stretched, put on a simple shirt and faded jeans, and stepped outside. Papa Samuel was already sweeping the compound. "Good morning, my son," the old man greeted warmly. "Good morning, Papa. You slept well." "I haven't slept this well in years," the old man chuckled. "That's because this village has no room for the noise of the city." He pointed toward the kitchen. "My wife has prepared breakfast." Soon, Ethan found himself eating hot yam with palm oil sauce and roasted fish while listening to birds singing from nearby trees. Everything felt simple. Everything felt real. As he finished eating, he looked toward the river. "Papa Samuel." "Yes, I'd like to learn more about this village." The old man smiled knowingly. "I suspect you mean you'd like to learn more about Ad." Ethan laughed softly. "Is it that obvious?" Papa Samuel leaned on his walking stick. "My son, when a man asks only one person's name over and over, old people like me notice." Ethan smiled but said nothing. The old man nodded toward the river. "She'll be there by now. Thank you." Ethan began walking along the narrow footpath leading toward the riverbank. The village had fully awakened. Women balanced baskets of vegetables on their heads. Children hurried to school in faded uniforms. Farmers walked toward their fields carrying hoes over their shoulders. Everyone seemed busy, yet there was still enough time for gossip. As Ethan passed a small group of women fetching water, he overheard them talking. "I saw Adise helping another stranger yesterday. She's always trying to rescue everybody. Maybe she's hoping someone will finally marry her." The women laughed. Ethan frowned but continued walking. He was beginning to notice a pattern. No matter what Ad did, someone always found a reason to mock her. When he finally reached the river, he saw her standing inside her old wooden canoe. The early morning sunlight reflected beautifully on the water as she threw her fishing net into the river with practiced ease. Watching her work was almost mesmerizing. Every movement was graceful despite requiring tremendous strength. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She simply knew her craft. After pulling in another heavy catch, she noticed Ethan standing on the riverbank. She smiled. "The truck survived." He laughed. "Thanks to you, I'm glad." He hesitated before speaking again. "Would you mind if I stayed for a while?" She looked surprised. "Most visitors don't enjoy watching people work." "I think I might." She shrugged. "As long as you don't mind getting your shoes dirty. I've already accepted that fate." She laughed. It was the first time Ethan heard her laugh freely. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was gentle, natural. For reasons he couldn't explain, hearing that laugh made him smile too. He rolled up his trousers and stepped into the shallow water. "Can I help?" Adise looked at him skeptically. "Have you ever fished before?" "No." Have you ever paddled a canoe? No. She folded her arms. Have you ever untangled a fishing net? No. Ethan scratched the back of his head. I suppose I'm not very useful. She smiled warmly. Everyone starts somewhere. She handed him one end of a rope. Hold this. He obeyed. Within seconds, the rope slipped from his hands. Adise burst into laughter. You weren't joking. I'm a businessman. She raised an eyebrow. So, business doesn't teach people how to hold ropes. It teaches us how to hold meetings. She laughed even harder. The sound echoed across the river. Ethan found himself laughing too. It had been a long time since anyone laughed with him instead of trying to impress him. For the next 2 hours, Adise patiently showed him the basics of fishing. He made countless mistakes. He nearly fell into the river twice. He tangled one of the smaller nets. At one point, he accidentally splashed muddy water onto his own clothes. Instead of becoming frustrated, Adise urged him again. He tried better. He tried once more. You're improving. No one has ever called me good at manual work. She smiled. You'll survive. As they worked together, Ethan noticed something remarkable. Every fisherman who passed greeted Adise respectfully, not because she was popular, but because she had earned their respect through years of hard work. One elderly fisherman paddled closer. Good morning, Papa Musa. My wife is feeling better. I'm happy to hear that the medicine you bought helped. Ethan looked at her. You bought medicine? She looked slightly embarrassed. It wasn't much. Papa Musa smiled gratefully. You paid for everything. You saved her life. Before Ethan could ask more questions, the old fisherman paddled away. Ethan stared at Adise. You never mentioned that. She shrugged. It wasn't important. Saving someone's life isn't important. She looked genuinely confused. Why would I talk about helping someone? Good things shouldn't be announced. Ethan remained silent. He had attended charity dinners where wealthy donors demanded newspaper headlines for donating a fraction of their fortune. Yet, here was a woman who quietly spent the little she had helping others without expecting recognition. The contrast amazed him. Later that morning, they returned to shore carrying several baskets filled with fish. As they walked toward the market, Ethan noticed something else. Every few steps, someone stopped Adise, not to mock her this time, to ask for help. An elderly woman struggled to lift a heavy bag of cassava. Adise, please, I'll carry it. Without hesitation, she lifted both the cassava bag and her own basket of fish. A young mother couldn't control her crying toddler while carrying water. Adise carried the water containers for her. A blind old man needed help crossing a muddy path. She guided him carefully. She never complained, never sighed, never rushed anyone. By the time they reached the market, Ethan had counted 7 different people she had helped in less than an hour. He finally asked, Do you always do this? She looked puzzled. Do what? Help everyone? She smiled. If I'm able to help, why shouldn't I? What if you're tired? She looked toward the busy market. Everyone is carrying something. Some carry heavy baskets, others carry heavy hearts. If I can make someone's burden lighter, even for a few minutes, then today is a good day. Her answer stayed in Ethan's mind long after they reached her fish stall. As Adise arranged the fish neatly, customers began arriving. One young woman accidentally handed over 2 large notes instead of 1. Adise counted the money, then immediately called her back. Excuse me. The woman turned. You gave me too much. She returned the extra money. The customer looked shocked. I didn't even notice. Adise smiled. Now you have. After the woman left, Ethan asked quietly, How much extra was it? Almost enough to buy food for 3 days. And you still returned it? She looked surprised by the question. It wasn't mine. Keeping it would have been stealing. Ethan nodded slowly. Integrity, another rare quality. As the afternoon sun grew hotter, business slowed. An exhausted little boy wandered through the market, staring hungrily at people's food. His clothes were torn. His slippers were broken. Eyes called him over. When did you last eat? He lowered his head. Yesterday. Without hesitation, she opened the small container that held her own lunch. It contained the only food she had brought for herself. She handed everything to the boy. Eat. He looked uncertain. What about you? I'll eat later. The boy smiled gratefully and hurried away. Ethan knew she was lying. There was no more food. She had given away her entire lunch. You'll be hungry, she laughed softly. I've been hungry before. I'll survive. Something tightened inside Ethan's chest. He had met people who donated millions while making sure cameras captured every moment. Adise gave away her own meal when no one was watching. Not for applause, not for praise, simply because someone else needed it more. That afternoon, Ethan followed her as she visited several elderly widows living on the outskirts of the village, from the basket of unsold fish. She quietly selected the largest ones. She knocked gently on each door. "Mama Grace, I brought today's fish." The old widow smiled brightly again. "You've already helped me this week." Adise laughed. "You need strength." The same scene repeated at another house, then another. By sunset, most of her remaining fish had been given away. Ethan could no longer remain silent. "Adise." "Yes. How do you survive financially if you keep giving away what you earn?" She adjusted the now nearly empty basket on her head. "I don't always know. Doesn't that worry you?" "Sometimes." She looked toward the river where the evening sun painted the water gold. "My father taught me something before he died." "What was it?" He said the river never stops flowing. If God can refill the river every season, he can refill an honest person's basket. Ethan looked at her thoughtfully. "So you simply trust?" She nodded. "Every day." As they continued walking, they passed a group of young women gathered beneath a mango tree. Among them was Chidinma. The moment she spotted Ad, she smirked. "Look who's following our village strong men." The women laughed. Another added loudly, "Be careful. She might ask you to carry fishing nets instead of flowers." More laughter followed. Chadma looked Ethan up and down. "You seem like a handsome young man. You can do much better. You deserve a beautiful woman." The women nodded in agreement. Adise lowered her eyes. She was about to continue walking without responding. But before she could move, Ethan spoke calmly. "I think she's beautiful." The laughter stopped instantly. Silence spread across the road. Chidima blinked. "What?" Ethan looked directly at her. "I said, I think she's beautiful." The women exchanged confused glances. Chidima forced a laugh. "You must be joking." Ethan shook his head. "No." He turned toward Ad. "I've met many beautiful faces. They're common, but I've never met a heart like hers." Without another word, he walked away. Adise stood frozen. No one had ever defended her before, especially not in public. She looked at Ethan, unable to speak. He simply smiled. "Shall we keep walking?" She nodded quietly as they continued toward Mom and Go's small house. Neither of them noticed the stunned expressions left behind. For the first time, someone had openly challenged the village's belief that beauty existed only in appearance. That evening, after Ethan returned to Papa Samuel's guest house, he sat alone outside beneath a sky filled with stars. He thought about everything he had witnessed throughout the day. Ad's honesty, her generosity, her patience, her humility, her quiet faith. She possessed every quality he had spent years searching for, yet the village saw only her rough hands and muscular shoulders. He smiled to himself. Perhaps people really were blind, not because they could not see, but because they refused to look beyond appearances. Meanwhile, inside her tiny mud house, Adise prepared dinner with her mother. Mom and Goy noticed the unusual smile on her daughter's face. "You look happy today." Ad hesitated before answering. "I made a new friend." Her mother smiled knowingly. "The traveler." Adise nodded. "He snorts different." "Different how?" "He listens. He doesn't laugh. He treats me like I'm just another person." Mom and Goy reached across the table and gently squeezed her daughter's hand. "Sometimes, my child, God answers prayers quietly." Adise looked down, unsure why her heart beat faster whenever she remembered Ethan's words. I've never met a heart like hers. She had spent years believing no man would ever see beyond her appearance. Yet somehow a stranger had looked past the muscles, the rough hands, and the endless gossip, and had seen the person she truly was. Neither of them realized it yet, but the bond forming between them was growing stronger with every passing day, and before long, that quiet friendship would face a test neither of them expected, one that would reveal whether feelings born from kindness could survive the weight of secrets, envy, and a truth powerful enough to change both of their lives forever. The days that followed passed with a gentle rhythm that neither Ethan Williams nor Adiper had expected. Every morning before the sun painted the river with shades of gold, Ad was already awake, preparing her old canoe for another day of fishing. And almost every morning, Ethan appeared at the riverbank with an eager smile and clothes that seemed destined to become muddy. The villagers noticed in a place where almost everyone knew everyone else's business. It did not take long for gossip to spread. The stranger is always following Ad. I don't understand it. Maybe he lost a bet. He must be desperate. Laughter followed wherever the rumors traveled, but Ethan paid no attention. For the first time in years, he genuinely enjoyed waking up each morning. He no longer cared about expensive breakfasts served in luxury hotels. He preferred roasted yam eaten beside the river. He no longer cared about perfectly pressed designer suits. He was happier wearing simple clothes stained with river water. Most importantly, he no longer felt lonely. One cool morning, Ethan arrived carrying 2 calabashes. Ad looked at him curiously. What are those for? I asked Papa Samuel how people here carry drinking water while fishing. She laughed and he gave you calabashes. He said, I'd need them. She smiled warmly. You're learning. I'm trying. She climbed into her canoe while Ethan carefully stepped inside. The canoe rocked violently. He immediately lost his balance. Careful, Adnid. I'm trying to stay alive. She couldn't help laughing. You've improved since the first day. That isn't saying much. She pushed the canoe away from the shore. The river was calm. Morning mist floated peacefully across the water as birds circled overhead. For several minutes, they paddled in comfortable silence. Finally, Ethan spoke. Can I ask you something? You've already asked hundreds of questions. He grinned. Then one more won't hurt. She nodded. Were you always a fisherwoman? Her smile faded slightly. No, I was 14 when my father died. She dipped the paddle into the water slowly. After his death, people advised my mother to sell the canoe. They said fishing wasn't suitable for a girl. What did you do? I refused. She looked toward the horizon. I remembered every lesson my father taught me. I practiced every day. The first few weeks were terrible. I fell into the river more times than I can count. Ethan smiled. I would have paid to see that. She playfully splashed a little water toward him. You wouldn't be laughing if you'd seen it. He laughed. So, everyone accepted you eventually? She shook her head. They accepted my fish. They never accepted me. Silence settled between them. After a while, Ethan asked softly, Did that ever make you want to quit? She thought for a moment. Many times. So why didn't you? She smiled. Because my mother needed to eat. The simplicity of her answer struck him deeply. There had been no dramatic speeches, no complaints, only responsibility. They reached the fishing grounds and Ad began casting the nets. Ethan eagerly helped. Although he was still inexperienced, he had improved considerably. He could now untangle ropes without creating a disaster. He could paddle without spinning the canoe in circles. He even managed to pull in smaller fishing nets by himself. Adise noticed. You've become stronger. I have an excellent teacher. She smiled shilly. You learn quickly. So do you. She looked confused. What do you mean? I've been teaching you fishing and you've been teaching me something far more valuable. She tilted her head. Like what? How to live? She laughed. I've never left this village. You've seen more of life than many people with private jets. She shook her head. I don't think so. I know so. His voice carried a sincerity that made her heart beat a little faster. She quickly looked away. Later that afternoon, they returned to the market. As usual, Adise arranged her fish neatly. Before she could call out to customers, Ethan surprised her. I'll help you sell today. She laughed. You? Why not? You've never sold fish. I've negotiated billionaire contracts. She folded her arms. Fish buyers aren't investors. We'll see. Within minutes, Ethan enthusiastically called out to passing customers. Fresh fish. The freshest in the market. An elderly woman approached. How much? Ethan confidently quoted a price. The woman burst into laughter. My son? That's almost half the real price. Adise covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. You almost gave away all today's profits. Ethan scratched his head. I suppose I still have much to learn. The surrounding traders laughed, but this time even Adise joined them. For once, laughter felt joyful instead of cruel. The elderly woman smiled. I like this young man. He isn't ashamed to learn. Adise noticed something remarkable. Ethan never acted superior. Despite obviously being well educated, He accepted correction with humility. It reminded her of something her father used to say. A wise person never stops learning. As the days passed, Ethan became part of Ad's daily routine. They worked together, laughed together, shared simple meals, talked for hours beside the river. He learned about her childhood. She learned that he loved reading books, traveling, and helping struggling businesses. Of course, he carefully avoided revealing his true identity. Whenever she asked about his work, he simply smiled. I work with companies. What kind of companies? Different kinds. You always answer questions without answering them. He laughed. Maybe. She shook her head. You're mysterious. Is that a bad thing? I haven't decided yet. Their conversations became easier with every passing day. Sometimes they spoke for hours. Other times they sat quietly watching the river without saying anything. Oddly enough, neither found the silence uncomfortable. Not everyone appreciated their growing friendship. One afternoon, Chidima watched from across the market as Ethan helped Adrie baskets of fish. She frowned. What does he see in her? One of her friends shrugged. I don't know. He barely even looks at you anymore. Chidima's pride was wounded. For years, she had been admired by nearly every unmarried man in the village. Now a handsome stranger ignored her completely. She refused to accept it. The next morning, she deliberately positioned herself along the path Ethan usually walked. As he approached, she smiled brightly. Good morning. Good morning. I've noticed you're new here. I'm Chidinma. I'm Ethan. She extended her hand. I was thinking. She smiled sweetly. If you'd like someone to show you around the village, I'd be happy to. Thank you. But Ad already has. Her smile froze. Oh, I appreciate the offer. He politely continued walking. Chidinma watched him leave in disbelief. No one rejects me. One of her friends whispered. Maybe he truly likes Ad. Chidinma folded her arms. Well, see about that. That evening after the market closed, Ethan and Ad sat beneath a giant mango tree overlooking the river. The sunset painted the sky with brilliant shades of orange and pink. Children laughed nearby as they chased one another across the open field. For a long while, neither spoke. Finally, Ad broke the silence. Can I ask you something? Anything? Why are you still here? He looked surprised. What do you mean? You've been in this village longer than most travelers. You don't seem to be in a hurry. He looked toward the river before answering. When I arrived, I was searching for something. What? He smiled faintly. Peace, and I think I'm beginning to find it. She smiled. I'm glad. What about you? What are you searching for? She looked thoughtful. I stopped searching a long time ago. For what? She hesitated. For someone who sees me. Ethan turned toward her. She laughed nervously. It sounds silly. No, it doesn't. She stared at the flowing river. Most people see my muscles. They see my rough hands. They see the work I do. But very few people actually see me. Her voice became quieter. After hearing people say, no man would ever love me for so many years, she shrugged. I suppose I started believing them. Ethan's heart tightened. He wanted to tell her everything. That she was one of the most remarkable women he had ever met. That every day he admired her more. That he looked forward to every conversation they shared. Instead, he simply asked gently, Do you believe that now? She smiled sadly. Some days yes, some days no. I've learned to leave those things in God's hands. Without thinking, Ethan reached over and gently placed his hand over hers. I think they're wrong. She looked into his eyes for several long succaves above them. Their hands remained together. Neither of them pulled away. Meanwhile, hidden behind nearby bushes, Chidima had witnessed everything. Her face hardened with jealousy. So it's true. She quietly slipped away before they noticed her. By the following morning, the entire village seemed to know. They were holding hands. The stranger has fallen for Adise. Impossible. Has he gone blind? The gossip spread faster than wildfire. Groups gathered beneath trees discussing the unexpected friendship. Some laughed openly. Others shook their heads in disbelief. A few even pitied Ethan. When Ada arrived at the market carrying her fish, whispers followed her everywhere. She tried to ignore them, but they grew louder. Finally, one young man called out, Be careful, stranger. Our Adise might carry you home if you get tired. His friends burst into laughter. Another shouted, "You should start lifting weights if you want to marry her." The laughter became louder. Ethan calmly placed his basket on the table. Then he looked directly at the group. "I'm not ashamed of standing beside someone who works honestly." The laughter faded. He continued, "In fact, I respect her more than many people who spend their days laughing at others." Silence spread through the market. The young men looked away. No one expected the quiet traveler to defend Adise so confidently. She stared at Ethan, unable to speak. Nobody had ever stood up for her like this. Not once. Not even when she was a little girl. As the crowd slowly dispersed, she whispered, "You didn't have to do that. I know. So why did you?" He smiled gently. "Because the truth deserves a voice." Her eyes became moist. She quickly turned away so he wouldn't notice. That evening, after returning home, Mom immediately sensed something had changed. Her daughter hummed softly while preparing dinner that had become rare over the years. "You smiled all day." Adise looked embarrassed. "Did I?" "You've smiled more this week than you have in the last 5 years." Her mother laughed. "Tell me about the traveler." Ad blushed. "There's nothing to tell." "Oh, you spend every day together. You laugh together. The whole village is talking." Adise covered her face. "Please don't start." Mama and Goy smiled knowingly. "Do you like him?" Ad remained silent. The silence itself was an answer. After a long moment, she spoke softly. "He's kind. He listens. He respects people. He never laughs at me." Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "When he looks at me," she searched for the right words, "I don't feel ugly." Mom and Goy reached across the table and gently held her daughter's hand. "My child, you have never been ugly. You simply met too many people who were blind." Tears gathered in Ad's eyes. For years, she had built walls around her heart. Convinced that love was meant for women who looked like Chidinma, now those walls were beginning to crack. She was frightened. Hope had always seemed more dangerous than loneliness, because if hope failed, the pain would be far greater. Across the village, Ethan sat outside Papa Samuel's guest house beneath a sky filled with countless stars. He replayed every conversation he had shared with the D's, every smile, every laugh, every quiet moment beside the river. He had traveled across Nigeria believing true love might no longer exist. Now he found himself thinking about one extraordinary woman almost every waking moment. Yet one problem continued to trouble him. Adise still believed he was an ordinary traveler. She knew nothing about his companies, nothing about his wealth, nothing about the life waiting for him beyond the village. For now, that secret protected the honesty growing between them. But Ethan knew secrets could not remain hidden forever. Sooner or later, the truth about who he really was would come to light. When it did, everything between them would be tested. Would Adise see him differently? Would she feel betrayed? Or would their growing affection prove strong enough to survive the revelation that the simple man helping her selfish was in reality one of the richest men in Africa? As he looked toward the quiet river shimmering beneath the moonlight, Ethan whispered a silent prayer. For the first time in years, he was no longer afraid of losing his fortune. He was afraid of losing the woman who had quietly stolen his heart. The morning began like every other morning in the quiet fishing village. Before dawn, Adise pushed her father's old canoe into the river while the sky was still wrapped in darkness. The cool breeze carried the scent of fresh water, and the sound of crickets slowly gave way to the cheerful songs of birds welcoming another day. She smiled as she dipped the paddle into the calm river. For the first time in many years, she found herself looking forward to something other than work. She was looking forward to seeing Ethan. She still found it difficult to believe that someone could enjoy spending so much time with her. Even after weeks of friendship, she sometimes caught herself wondering if she were dreaming. She remembered the first day he had arrived, stuck in the mud during the heavy rain. She smiled to herself. He couldn't even hold a fishing rope, she whispered. Now he could cast small nets without getting tangled. He still made mistakes. He still paddled slower than everyone else. But he never complained. Most importantly, he had never once looked down on her. That alone made him different from nearly everyone she had ever met. She reached the fishing grounds and spent several hours catching fish before returning to the village shortly after sunrise. As expected, Ethan was waiting at the riverbank. He wore another simple shirt with the sleeves rolled up and an old pair of jeans that had already collected countless mud stains over the past few weeks. When he saw her approaching, he waved enthusiastically. "I was beginning to think the fish kidnapped you." Adise laughed. They tried, but I escaped. He helped pull the canoe onto the shore. I think today's catch is even bigger. The river has been generous. So have you. She looked at him curiously. What do you mean you always thank the river? You always thank God. You never boast. She shrugged. There's nothing to boast about. If the river decides not to provide tomorrow, my strength alone won't feed me. Ethan admired that answer. She possessed a humility that could not be bought. As they carried baskets toward the market together, neither of them noticed a black luxury SUV parked several kilometers outside the village. Inside sat Grace, Ethan's personal assistant. She looked worried. Beside her sat two senior executives from Williams Global Holdings. One of them checked his watch. We've delayed this meeting for almost 3 weeks. Grace nodded. I know, but Mr. Williams specifically instructed us not to disturb him. Then why are we here? Because this can't wait any longer. The executive handed her a file. The international merger documents require his personal signature. She sighed. There was no other choice. A convoy of additional vehicles soon joined them. Security officers climbed out. Another SUV carried legal advisors. One more transported company directors. Although Ethan had escaped his luxurious world for a while, business had finally caught up with him. Meanwhile, the village market buzzed with activity. Adise arranged fresh fish across her wooden stall, while Ethan helped greet customers. Business was unusually busy. Children laughed nearby. Women bargained over prices. Everything felt perfectly normal. Then the distant sound of engines echoed through the village. One vehicle, then another, then several more. People stopped talking. Children ran toward the main road. What is happening? Someone pointed into the distance. Dust rose into the air as an impressive convoy of black luxury SUVs slowly entered the village. The vehicles looked completely out of place among the mud houses and narrow roads. Shiny paint reflected the bright sunlight. Security officers wearing dark suits stepped out first. The villagers stared with wide eyes. I've never seen so many expensive vehicles. Who is coming? Could it be a governor? No, the governor doesn't travel with this many people. Even Chief Okoro hurried from his compound to see what was happening. The convoy stopped in the center of the market. Silence spread. One security officer stepped forward and looked around. His eyes immediately landed on Ethan. Relief washed across his face. There he is. Before anyone could react, the security officers hurried toward Ethan. The villagers instinctively moved aside. One of the executives reached him first. Good morning, Mr. Williams. Grace followed closely behind. Sir, she smiled apologetically. I'm sorry, we had no choice. Every sound in the market disappeared. People looked from the elegantly dressed visitors to the simply dressed man who had been selling fish moments earlier. Ethan sighed quietly. I was hoping for one more week. I know. Grace handed him a thick folder. The merger documents. They must be signed today. He nodded. I understand. The executives greeted him respectfully. Good morning, Chairman. We're honored to see you again. The villagers stared in disbelief. Chairman, Mr. Williams. The name sounded strangely familiar. Chief Okoro stepped forward cautiously. Excuse me. One executive turned politely. Yes, our guest. He pointed toward Ethan. Who exactly is he? The executive looked confused. You don't know? The chief slowly shook his head. The executive smiled. This is Mr. Ethan Williams, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Williams Global Holdings. The words struck the crowd like thunder. One woman gasped loudly. Another nearly dropped her basket of tomatoes. A young man whispered, Williams Global Holdings, the Billionaire, the same company that owns ships. Another added, and luxury hotels, someone else exclaimed. The richest young businessmen on television. Shock spread through the crowd. People immediately pulled out their phones. Several searched his name online. Within seconds, photographs appeared. Magazine covers, television interviews, business awards. There was no doubt the quiet traveler was one of Africa's most successful billionaires. Chidinma stood frozen. Her mouth slowly opened. She remembered every opportunity she had ignored. Every time she dismissed him because he looked ordinary. Every cruel joke she had made about him spending time with Ad. Her face turned pale. Meanwhile, Ad remained completely speechless. She stared at Ethan as though looking at a stranger. You? She struggled to speak. Your Ethan looked into her eyes. Yes, you lied to me. His expression immediately softened. I never wanted to, but I needed people to know me before they knew my money. Tears gathered in Ad's eyes. So everything was real, he answered before she could finish. My friendship, my respect, my feelings, none of those were lies. She looked down at her rough hands. So you're actually a billionaire? He nodded quietly. Silence stretched between them. Around them, the village erupted into excited conversations. The billionaire chose our village. He stayed in Papa Samuel's guest house. He helped Selish. I don't believe it. Reporters who had followed the convoy began taking photographs. Camera flashes filled the market. Journalists quickly surrounded Ethan. Sir, why have you been living here? Are you investing in this community? Is this a new business project? Security officers formed a protective circle around him. For the first time since arriving, Ethan looked uncomfortable. He glanced toward Ad. She had quietly stepped backward. The sudden attention overwhelmed her. She slipped away unnoticed. By the time Ethan finished answering brief questions, she was gone. His heart sank. He immediately turned toward Grace. Reschedule everything. She blinked. Sir, I'm not finished here. The merger can wait another hour. Without another word, Ethan hurried away from the market. He knew exactly where Ad would go, the river. Sure enough, he found her sitting alone inside her father's old canoe. She wasn't fishing. She simply stared across the calm water. He approached slowly. Adise. She didn't answer immediately. Finally, she spoke without turning around. So, who have I really been talking to all this time? The same Ethan, just without the titles. She laughed bitterly. You own private jets. I taught you how to untangle fishing nets. He smiled faintly. You still haven't mastered that. She almost smiled before catching herself. You should have told me. I wanted to. So why didn't you? He sat beside her on the edge of the canoe. Because every woman I've met saw the billionaire before she saw me. I was tired. Tired of wondering whether people liked me or my money. He looked directly at her. When you helped pull my truck from the mud, you didn't know who I was. You refused my money. You expected nothing. For the first time in years, I felt like an ordinary man. Adise listened quietly. He continued. Then I watched you. You gave food to hungry children. You bought medicine for sick people. You cared for your mother. You worked harder than anyone I've ever met. You never asked me for anything. His voice became softer. Not once. She finally looked at him. I couldn't ask. Why not? You looked like an ordinary traveler. She laughed sadly. I thought you were poorer than me. Both of them laughed. The tension eased slightly. Ethan reached into his pocket and removed the small notebook his father had given him before the journey. I want to show you something. He handed it to her. She opened it carefully. Inside were handwritten notes, journal entries, thoughts about his travels. Then she found an entry dated the day they first met. It read, Today I met the strongest woman I've ever seen. She pushed my truck out of deep mud, refused my money, smiled, and walked away. I don't know her name yet, but I already know she's different from anyone I've ever met. She looked up. You wrote this. He nodded. Every word. She continued reading. Several later entries mentioned her. She feeds people before feeding herself. She gives without expecting applause. The village laughs at her because of her appearance. I don't understand how they fail to see the beauty inside her. Tears rolled down Ad's cheeks. You really thought all this? I still do. He gently took the notebook back. I didn't come here searching for a billionaire's wife. I came searching for someone with a genuine heart. And I found her. She lowered her eyes. You deserve someone educated. I mean school. You deserve someone elegant. She sighed. You deserve someone who fits into your world. Ethan smiled warmly. Who says my world is complete without you? Before she could answer, loud voices echoed from the riverbank. The villagers had followed them. Chief Okoro stepped forward first. His proud expression had disappeared. Instead, he looked deeply ashamed. He removed his traditional cap, a sign of great respect. My daughter. Ad looked surprised. He had never called her that before. I owe you an apology. The entire village watched silently. I judged you. I allowed others to mock you. I believed your strength made you less of a woman. He lowered his head. I was wrong. One by one, others stepped forward. Papa, Emma, Mama Ruth, several traders, even some of the young men who had mocked her daily. They all apologized. Finally, Chidinma approached. Tears filled her eyes. I was jealous. I thought beauty was enough. I laughed at you because I believed I was better. She shook her head. I wasn't. I'm sorry. Ad stood speechless. For years, she had imagined confronting the people who mocked her. She had dreamed of proving them wrong. Yet, now that the moment had arrived, she felt no desire for revenge. She simply smiled through her tears. I forgive all of you. The words surprised everyone, including Ethan. Chief Okoro looked at her with admiration. Your heart is even more beautiful than we realized. As the evening sun slowly descended over the river, the villagers walked back together in thoughtful silence. Many glanced toward Adise new eyes, not because she now stood beside a billionaire, but because at last they were beginning to see the woman they should have appreciated all along. For Ethan, however, the greatest relief was not that his identity had been revealed. It was that despite the shock, despite the secrecy, and despite the enormous difference between their worlds, Adise had looked into his eyes and recognized the same kind-hearted traveler who had once become hopelessly stuck in the mud. Their story had entered a new chapter. The truth was finally out, but greater challenges still lay ahead, and the greatest test of their love had only just begun. The days following the revelation of Ethan Williams' true identity were unlike anything the little fishing village had ever experienced. For years, the village had been peaceful and largely unnoticed by the outside world. Now, television crews parked their vans near the market square. Bloggers wandered through the narrow footpaths with cameras hanging from their necks. Curious visitors arrived in expensive vehicles, hoping to catch a glimpse of the billionaire who had secretly lived among ordinary fishermen. The quiet village had suddenly become famous, but for Adise Okafor, the attention felt more like a burden than a blessing. She missed the mornings when the only sounds she heard were birds singing over the river and the gentle splash of her paddle against the water. Now, whenever she stepped outside her small mud house, people whispered, "There she is, the billionaire's girlfriend, the fisherwoman who captured Ethan Williams' heart." Some spoke with admiration, others spoke with envy. Adise lowered her head and continued walking toward the river. She had never wanted fame. She only wanted peace. Meanwhile, Ethan stood outside Papa Samuel's guest house, watching another black SUV arrive. Grace stepped out, carrying several files. She sighed dramatically. I never imagined I'd be conducting board meetings in a fishing village. Ethan smiled. You'll survive. I hope so. She handed him the documents. The merger has finally been approved. Excellent. There are also invitations from investors in London, Dubai, and New York. He barely glanced at them. Postpone everything. Grace stared at him. Everything. Everything. She blinked. Sir, the International Investment Summit has been planned for almost a year. I know. They're expecting you. They can wait. Grace laughed softly. I've worked with you for 8 years. I've never seen you ignore business like this. Ethan smiled toward the river. Some things are worth more than business. Grace followed his gaze. She immediately understood. You love her. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he smiled. That was answer enough. At the riverbank, Adise sat quietly inside her canoe, repairing one of her father's old fishing nets. Although her hands moved automatically, her thoughts wandered. Everything had changed. She remembered how comfortable their conversations had been before learning Ethan was a billionaire. Now she found herself wondering whether she truly belonged in his world. She looked around the old canoe, the patched fishing net, the faded wrapper she wore. Then she remembered the convoy of luxury vehicles, the executives, the security officers, the helicopters that had briefly circled above the village. Their worlds couldn't have been more different. She sighed. Perhaps this beautiful friendship had already reached its end. Just then, she heard familiar footsteps approaching. You've been avoiding me. She looked up. Ethan stood smiling beside the canoe. I'm not avoiding you. No. You disappeared immediately after the market yesterday. She smiled faintly. I needed time. I understand. He sat beside her. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. The river flowed peacefully before them. Finally, Ad broke the silence. Why didn't you leave? What do you mean? Most rich people would have returned to the city after their secret was discovered. I stayed. Why? He looked directly into her eyes. Because you're here. Her heart skipped. She quickly looked away. Ethan, I mean it. You still have companies to run. I do. You have meetings. Yes. You have responsibilities. I know. She sighed. Then why are you sitting beside a poor fisherwoman? He smiled warmly. Because I'd rather spend 1 hour beside you than an entire day inside another boardroom. She laughed softly. You say strange things. I say honest things. That afternoon, Ethan asked a question that surprised her. Will you teach me to cast the large fishing net? She stared at him. The large one? Yes. You can barely handle the medium-sized net. I've been practicing. She couldn't help laughing. Fine, but don't blame me if you fall into the river. He rolled up his sleeves confidently. I'll be fine. 10 minutes later, he proved her completely right. The heavy net twisted around his legs. He lost his balance. With a loud splash, he fell directly into the river. Ad laughed so hard she nearly dropped her paddle. Ethan emerged from the water dripping from head to toe. You planned this. She wiped tears of laughter from her eyes. I warned you. You enjoyed that very much. Even Ethan began laughing. The sound echoed across the river. Nearby fishermen smiled as they watched. One elderly fisherman whispered to another, I've never seen that rich man laugh so freely. The other nodded. And I've never seen a day this happy. As the days passed, Ethan continued learning everything he could about village life. He repaired broken nets. He helped pull canoes ashore. He joined fishermen before sunrise. Although he still wasn't nearly as skilled as Ad, everyone noticed how determined he was. One afternoon, while helping carry baskets of fish, Ethan noticed something troubling. Several children sat outside an old classroom whose roof had partially collapsed. Rainwater had damaged many of the desks. Only one teacher struggled to educate dozens of students. Ethan frowned. Is this the only school? Adise nodded sadly. Many children stop attending. Why? Some families can't afford books. Others need their children to work. And when it rains, she pointed toward the damaged roof. Classes stop. Ethan remained silent. Later that evening, he quietly called Grace. I need architects. Architects? Yes. And engineers? She smiled knowingly. What else? A medical team. She laughed. I thought you postponed work. This isn't work, it's family. Over the next few days, construction experts quietly visited the village. Engineers inspected roads. Doctors examined elderly villagers free of charge. Surveyors measured land near the river. Nobody understood what was happening. Rumors spread quickly. The billionaire is buying the village. No, he's building a resort. I heard he's opening a factory. Only Ethan knew the truth. One evening he visited Mama Goy. She welcomed him warmly. My son, good evening, Mama. Come inside. Their small home remained exactly as it had always been. Simple, clean, filled with warmth. Mom and Goy served him roasted plantains. I wish we had something better. He smiled. I've eaten in expensive restaurants around the world. Nothing tastes better than food shared with kindness. The older woman nodded approvingly. I understand now why my daughter smiles whenever she speaks about you. Ethan looked surprised. She talks about me. Mama and Goy laughed. Every day. He smiled shilly. I wanted to ask your permission. She looked curious. For what? He took a deep breath. I love Ad. The older woman's smile softened. I know. I've never met anyone like her. I know. I want to spend the rest of my life with her. Tears immediately gathered in Mom Go's eyes. You've made an old woman very happy, he continued. But I don't want to marry her because I feel sorry for her. I know. I want to marry her because she makes me a better man. Mangoy reached across the table and held his hands. My son, money may attract many people, but only a good heart can recognize another good heart. You already have my blessing. The following morning, Ethan asked Ade to meet him by the river just before sunset. She spent the entire day wondering why. When evening finally arrived, she walked slowly toward the place where they had first met. The muddy road had dried long ago. The river reflected brilliant shades of orange as the sun slowly disappeared behind distant trees. To her surprise, the entire riverbank had been decorated. Simple lanterns hung from tree branches, fresh flowers lined the pathway. Several villagers stood quietly in the distance. Papa Samuel, Mom Goy, Chief Ukoro, even Grace had arrived from Lagos. Soft traditional music filled the evening air. Ad looked around in confusion. What is all this? Before anyone answered, Ethan walked toward her. He wore a simple white native outfit instead of his usual casual clothes. In his hands was a small wooden box. Her heart began beating faster. "Ethan," he smiled gently. "Do you remember the first day we met?" She nodded. "You pushed my truck out of the mud. You refused my money. You smiled and walked away." The villagers listened quietly. "You had no idea who I was. You treated me with kindness anyway." He stepped closer. "I spent years searching for someone who would love me for myself. I traveled across villages hoping to find genuine people. I never imagined I would find the most extraordinary woman beside a quiet river." Ad's eyes filled with tears. He continued, "You taught me that strength isn't measured by muscles, it's measured by sacrifice. You taught me that wealth isn't counted in money, it's counted in kindness. You taught me that beauty isn't found in smooth hands, it's found in a generous heart." Many villagers lowered their heads in shame. Every cruel word they had spoken about Ado painfully in their memories. Ethan slowly knelt on one knee. Gasps spread through the crowd. He opened the small wooden box. Inside rested a breathtaking diamond ring that sparkled brilliantly beneath the evening sun. Adise covered her mouth. Tears streamed freely down her face. Ethan looked into her eyes. "Adise Okafor, you once told me you wished someone would truly see you. I see you. I see your courage. I see your compassion. I see your honesty. I see the woman who carries her family on her shoulders without complaining. I see the woman who feeds hungry children before feeding herself. I see the woman who made me believe in love again." His voice trembled with emotion. "I don't want a perfect woman. I want you. Will you marry me?" Silence covered the riverbank. No one moved. No one breathed. Ade stood frozen. The girl who had spent years believing no man could ever love her suddenly found herself staring at the man who possessed everything money could buy, yet wanted only her. She remembered every insult, every cruel laugh, every lonely night, every moment she had questioned her worth. Her father's words echoed in her heart. "The river rewards patience." Her mother's voice followed. "The right person will see your heart." She looked at Ethan, then at the villagers. Many of them were crying. Even Chidinma wiped tears from her cheeks. Adise smiled through her tears. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "Yes." The words seemed to float across the quiet river, then louder this time. "Yes, I'll marry you." Thunderous applause erupted. Children cheered. Women clapped joyfully. Several fishermen blew traditional horns. Grace laughed while wiping away tears. Papa Samuel hugged Chief Okoro. Mama Ngoy fell to her knees, thanking God. Ethan gently slipped the ring onto Ad's finger. Then he stood and embraced her. The villagers erupted into louder cheers. At that exact moment, something unexpected happened. Chief Okoro slowly walked forward, carrying the village staff of authority. He stood before everyone. His voice trembled. "Today our village has received a lesson that must never be forgotten." He turned toward the crowd. "We mocked this young woman because of her appearance. We measured beauty with our eyes instead of our hearts. We believed strength made her less of a woman. We were wrong." He raised the staff high. "From this day onward, let every child born in this village remember that character is greater than appearance. Kindness is greater than beauty, and a person's worth can never be measured by the work they do." The villagers applauded again. Many openly wept. Chidinma slowly approached Adise. "I don't deserve your friendship." Adise smiled. "Then earn it." Chidinma burst into tears and hugged her tightly. For years they had been enemies. Now the walls between them finally crumbled. As darkness settled over the river and lanterns glowed warmly in the evening breeze, Ethan held Ad's hand tightly. He whispered softly, "Do you know what the best part of today is?" She smiled. "What? You still haven't judged me." She laughed. "And you still can't throw a fishing net properly." He laughed with her. "I suppose you'll have to keep teaching me." "I suppose I will." Together they watched the river shimmer beneath the rising moon. The place where they had first met had now become the place where they promised to spend the rest of their lives together. The same villagers who had once laughed at the poor muscular fisherwoman now applauded her with pride. And everyone present understood a truth they would carry for the rest of their lives. The greatest treasures in the world are not discovered by looking at a person's face, their clothes, or their wealth. They are discovered by looking into the heart. The news of Ethan Williams' engagement to Udoka spread across Nigeria faster than anyone could have imagined. Within 24 hours, every major television station was discussing the remarkable love story. Newspapers printed photographs of Ethan kneeling beside the river, slipping a diamond ring onto the finger of a humble fisherwoman dressed in a simple wrapper. Social media exploded with reactions. Some people celebrated the story, others couldn't believe it. Many simply wanted to know who Ad was. Television presenters described her as the fisherwoman who captured the heart of Africa's most eligible billionaire. But those who truly knew Ad told something the headlines could never fully explain. She had not won Ethan because of luck. She had won his heart through kindness, humility, honesty, and unwavering strength. Back in the fishing village, life had changed almost overnight. Journalists arrived every morning. Photographers politely asked for interviews. Curious visitors traveled from distant states hoping to see the famous couple. Yet, despite all the attention, Adise refused to abandon her daily routine. The morning after the proposal, she still woke before sunrise. She still pushed her father's old canoe into the river. She still cast her fishing nets with the same determination she always had. When Ethan arrived at the riverbank, carrying 2 paddles over his shoulder, he couldn't help laughing. "I should have known I'd find you here," Adise smiled. "The fish don't stop swimming because I got engaged." He shook his head. "You truly are impossible, and yet you're marrying me. I consider myself very lucky." She laughed softly. "So do I." They climbed into the canoe together. For nearly 2 hours, they fished just as they had done before Ethan's identity became public. To Ade, those quiet moments on the river remained her favorite, out there. There were no cameras, no headlines, no billionaires, no famous fisherwoman, only Ethan and Adferdit. Later that afternoon, Ethan's mother, Evelyn Williams, arrived in the village for the first time. Unlike the convoy that had previously caused so much excitement, this visit was much quieter. Only 2 vehicles accompanied her. She stepped out wearing an elegant but simple anchor dress, her warm smile immediately putting everyone at ease. Mama and greeted her nervously. "Welcome." Evelyn gently embraced her. "It is an honor to finally meet the woman who raised such an extraordinary daughter." Mama and Goy smiled shilly. "I've heard many wonderful things about you. I hope only the true ones." They laughed together. Soon Ethan introduced his mother to Adise. Titi became nervous. She had never imagined meeting the mother of a billionaire. Would she approve? Would she secretly wish her son had chosen someone wealthier, someone more educated, someone from the same social class? Evelyn walked toward her. Without saying a word, she wrapped Ade in a warm embrace. "My son has spoken about you every single day." Adise smiled nervously. "I hope only good things." Evelyn laughed. "He hasn't stopped talking about your kindness." She gently held Ad's rough hands. "These hands remind me of my own mother." Adise looked surprised. "Your mother?" "She was a farmer. She worked until her hands looked just like yours." Evelyn smiled. "I learned long ago never to judge hard-working hands." Relief washed over Adise. The fear she had carried disappeared instantly. That evening, both families gathered beneath a large mango tree to discuss wedding plans. Richard Williams, Ethan's father, arrived shortly afterward. Unlike many wealthy businessmen, Richard dressed simply and greeted everyone respectfully. He shook hands with fishermen. He greeted elderly villagers. He even sat comfortably on an ordinary wooden bench instead of requesting special treatment. Chief Okoro watched him with admiration. "I understand now where Ethan learned humility." Richard smiled. "My father taught me, and now Ethan is teaching all of us." The discussion soon turned toward the wedding. One executive suggested holding the ceremony inside one of the country's most luxurious hotels. Another recommended a destination wedding abroad. Grace smiled politely. Mr. Williams has already rejected both ideas. Everyone looked toward Ethan. He smiled at Day. "Yes. Where would you like to get married?" She looked around the village, at the river, at the people who had watched her grow from childhood, at the little church where her father had once worshipped. "I want to marry where my father would have been happiest." Silence filled the gathering. She pointed toward the small village church. "I want to marry here." Ethan smiled warmly. "Then that's exactly where we'll marry." Preparations began immediately. Construction workers repaired the old church without changing its simple beauty. The roof was replaced. Fresh paint covered the walls. New wooden benches were installed. Villagers volunteered their time every day. The women cleaned and decorated. The men repaired roads leading to the church. Young people planted colorful flowers along the pathways. Nobody demanded payment. Everyone wanted to contribute. Even Chidima worked harder than anyone. One afternoon, While arranging flowers beside the church entrance, she quietly approached Adise. "I've been wanting to tell you something." Adise smiled. "I'm listening." Chidima lowered her eyes. "When I laughed at you, I wasn't really laughing because you were different." Adise remained silent. "I was jealous. Jealous. You were stronger than I was. You worked harder. You were respected by people who truly mattered. I thought beauty was enough." Tears filled her eyes. "I spent years trying to make you feel small because I was afraid someone would eventually notice how remarkable you were." Adise gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "We all make mistakes. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't something we earn. It's something we choose." Chidima burst into tears and hugged her tightly. Their years of bitterness finally ended. Several villagers watched quietly. Many wiped tears from their eyes. 3 weeks later, the wedding day finally arrived. Before sunrise, excitement filled the entire village. Women hurried between houses carrying decorated baskets. Children practiced singing. Drummers tested their instruments. Chefs prepared enormous pots of jell of rice, pepper soup, pounded yam, and fresh fish. The aroma drifted through every corner of the village. Luxury vehicles began arriving shortly after 8. Business executives, governors, traditional rulers, celebrities, international investors, foreign ambassadors, they all came to witness the wedding everyone had been talking about. Yet despite the distinguished guests, the villagers noticed something remarkable. Every visitor was treated equally. There were no special seats reserved only for the wealthy. Fishermen sat beside governors. Widows sat beside millionaires. Children laughed alongside famous actors. Ethan had personally insisted. "Today," he said, "everyone is family." Inside the small church, Adise stood quietly wearing a breathtaking white wedding gown. The dress was elegant but simple, reflecting exactly who she was. Her hair was beautifully styled. A delicate veil rested over her face. Even those who had once mocked her appearance struggled to recognize her, not because expensive clothes had transformed her, but because genuine happiness radiated from her face. Mama and Goy adjusted the veil gently. "You look beautiful." Adise smiled through tears. "Do I? You always have." The older woman kissed her forehead. "You simply needed someone who could see it." Outside, Ethan waited nervously beside the altar. Grace laughed softly. "I've negotiated billion-dollar contracts with you. I've never seen you this nervous." He smiled. "This feels much bigger." "It is." Richard placed a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "You've made the right choice. I know you chose character over appearances." Richard smiled proudly, "And that decision will bless you for the rest of your life." The church doors slowly opened. Everyone stood. Soft music filled the room. Adise entered holding her mother's hand. The entire congregation turned toward her. Gasps echoed softly throughout the church. Even those who had known her all their lives stared in amazement, not because of the expensive gown, not because of the jewelry, but because for the first time they looked beyond her muscles and rough hands. They finally saw the gentle, graceful woman who had always been there. Ethan couldn't take his eyes off her. As she reached the altar, tears filled his eyes. "You look incredible." She smiled. "So do you." The ceremony was simple but deeply emotional. The pastor spoke slowly. "Today we celebrate more than a marriage. We celebrate truth. We celebrate humility. We celebrate the victory of character over appearances." Many people nodded quietly. The pastor continued. "Too often society teaches us to judge people by beauty, wealth, education, or social status. But God looks at the heart." He looked toward Ad. This young woman spent years being mocked because her hands were rough. He turned toward Ethan. This young man spent years being pursued because his pockets were full. Today, they remind us that genuine love ignores both appearances and wealth. The church became silent. The words touched everyone deeply. When the moment finally came to exchange vows, Ethan looked directly into Ad's eyes. "I promise to love you when life is easy and when it is difficult. I promise to remember the woman who helped the stranger without expecting anything in return. I promise never to place my business above our family. I promise to keep learning from your kindness every day." Adise smiled through tears. Then she spoke. "I promise to love you whether we live in a palace or a small hut. I promise never to let wealth change the person I am. I promise to remind you of the simple joys we found beside the river, and I promise to stand beside you for the rest of my life." There wasn't a dry eye in the church. The pastor smiled warmly by the authority given to me. I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Cheers erupted. Applause echoed throughout the church. Children shouted joyfully. Traditional drummers immediately began playing. Outside, colorful flower petals filled the air as Ethan and Ad walked hand in hand into the bright afternoon sunshine. The celebration that followed lasted until late evening. Traditional dancers performed. Children sang. Guests from different cultures shared stories and laughter. Nobody cared about titles. Nobody cared about wealth. Everyone celebrated together. During the reception, Ethan stood before the microphone. The crowd gradually became quiet. He looked toward Ad before speaking. "I've been asked many times why I chose a fisherwoman." He smiled. "The answer is simple. I didn't marry the most beautiful face." He gently took Ad's hand. "I married the most beautiful heart." The crowd applauded loudly. He continued, "When I met Ad, she didn't know I was wealthy. She helped me because I was a human being, not because I was important." He looked around the gathering. If more people judged others by kindness instead of appearance, the world would become a much better place. The applause grew even louder. Then something unexpected happened. Chief Okoro slowly walked onto the stage carrying a wooden plaque. He turned toward the crowd. "4 years our village failed this young woman." He looked directly at AD. "We laughed, we judged, we underestimated you." He lowered his head respectfully. "Today we correct that mistake." He unveiled the plaque. It read AD Okafor Square, dedicated to the woman who taught our village that true beauty lives in the heart. The entire crowd rose to their feet. A standing ovation echoed across the celebration ground. Many villagers cried openly. Adise covered her face as tears streamed down her cheeks. She never imagined that the same people who once mocked her would one day honor her. Ethan wrapped an arm gently around her shoulders. "You deserve every bit of this." She shook her head. "I only did what my parents taught me." He smiled. "Exactly." As fireworks illuminated the night sky above the village, laughter and music filled the air. The wedding had united not only 2 hearts but also an entire community that had finally learned its greatest lesson. Beauty fades, wealth can disappear. Status changes, but kindness, humility, and a good heart leave a legacy that lasts for generations. And as Ethan and Ad danced beneath the stars, surrounded by people who had once doubted them and now celebrated them, they knew that their greatest adventure was only just beginning. The morning after their wedding, the village woke to a different kind of excitement. For years, the people had celebrated festivals, harvest seasons, and traditional ceremonies. But never had they witnessed a wedding that united wealthy executives, fishermen, governors, widows, celebrities, and ordinary villagers under the same roof. Long after the music had faded and the last guests had returned home, people were still talking about the ceremony. Children reenacted Ethan's proposal while playing beside the river. Women discussed Adi's beautiful wedding gown as they fetched water. The fishermen laughed as they teased one another about Ethan's first disastrous attempt at casting a fishing net. The atmosphere throughout the village was filled with joy. Inside the modest guest house where Ethan had first stayed, Papa Samuel sat outside smiling to himself. His wife noticed. "You've been smiling since sunrise." He nodded. "I keep thinking about how everything began. The billionaire stuck in the mud." Papa Samuel laughed heartily. Who would have imagined that one muddy road would change so many lives? His wife looked toward the river. "Sometimes God hides miracles inside ordinary days." Papa Samuel nodded. "And only later do we realize we were standing in the middle of one." Although Ethan and Ad could have left immediately for a luxurious honeymoon in Europe or the Maldives, they surprised everyone. At breakfast, Grace entered carrying a carefully arranged itinerary. She smiled proudly. "I've prepared 3 honeymoon options." She placed glossy brochures on the table. Private island in the Seychelles, luxury villa in Switzerland, 7-country European tour. Ethan looked at Ad. "What do you think?" Adise studied the brochures for a moment before smiling gently. "They're beautiful." But Grace tilted her head. But Ad looked outside the window toward the village. "There are people here who still don't have clean drinking water. There are children studying beneath leaking roofs. There are elderly widows who struggle to buy medicine." She looked back at Ethan. "I don't think I could enjoy a luxury vacation knowing that." Grace blinked. She had expected excitement. Instead, she heard compassion. Ethan smiled proudly. "I was hoping you'd say that." Grace looked between them. "You already discussed this." Ethan laughed. "No, I just know my wife." He turned to Grace. Cancel every honeymoon reservation. Grace smiled knowingly. I thought you might. That afternoon, Ethan gathered the entire village inside the open community square. Nobody knew why. Some assumed he wanted to say goodbye. Others believed he would announce plans to build a vacation resort. The square quickly filled with curious faces. Chief Okoro stood beside Mandoy. Papa Samuel leaned comfortably on his walking stick. Even Chidinma arrived early. Once everyone had gathered, Ethan stepped forward holding Ad's hand. He looked around slowly. I owe this village more than words can express. Silence settled over the crowd. I arrived here searching for peace. I found something much greater. He smiled at Ade. I found family. Warm smiles spread across many faces. He continued. This village welcomed me. He paused and laughed softly. Well, after my truck got stuck, everyone laughed. But more importantly, this village gave me the greatest blessing of my life. He looked lovingly at Ad. So today, I want to give something back. Grace stepped forward carrying several folders. She handed one to Chief Okoro. The elderly chief adjusted his glasses as he opened it. His eyes widened. What is this? Ethan smiled. The first project. A new primary and secondary school. The crowd gasped. Grace handed over another document. A fully equipped medical center. More gasps followed. Another file. A clean water project. Another modern fishing docks. Another. A fish processing factory owned jointly by the fishermen and fisherwomen of this village. The square erupted into excited whispers. Ethan raised his hand gently. There is more. The crowd immediately became silent again. I don't want charity. I want opportunity. He looked directly at the fishermen. The factory will belong to you. The profits will belong to you. My company will only provide the funding and training. Several fishermen looked at one another in disbelief. One elderly man began crying quietly. After the gathering ended, construction began almost immediately. Within days, engineers arrived. Bulldozers carefully cleared land. Architects measured building sites. Construction workers from nearby towns joined local laborers. For the first time, dozens of young people found stable employment without leaving the village. Adise visited the construction sites every day. Unlike many wealthy people who supervised from a distance, she insisted on speaking with the workers personally. One afternoon, she noticed a young laborer eating dry bread alone beneath a tree. She walked over. Why aren't you eating with everyone else? The young man smiled awkwardly. I sent most of my wages home. My younger sisters need school fees. She sat beside him. My father used to do the same. The young man looked surprised. You understand? I understand more than you think. She quietly asked one of the cooks to prepare another meal for him. She never mentioned it again. The laborer later told everyone, I've never met a rich woman who remembers what hunger feels like. Meanwhile, Ethan faced a different challenge. Although he spent most of his time in the village, his company still required leadership. One afternoon, Grace approached him carrying several files. Sir, he smiled. Please don't tell me another emergency. She sighed dramatically. Only 3. He laughed. That's an improvement. She opened the first file. The London investors want an answer. The shipping expansion requires approval. The hotel acquisition deadline is tomorrow. Ethan rubbed his forehead. Schedule virtual meetings. Grace smiled. You've become impossible. What do you mean? You used to work 16 hours every day. Now you insist meetings end before sunset. He looked toward the river. My wife likes evening walks. Grace laughed. I've definitely lost my old boss. No. You found a better one. She nodded thoughtfully. I think you're right. One evening, Ethan and Ad walked quietly along the riverbank. The setting sun reflected beautifully across the calm water. Several children waved happily as they passed. One little girl suddenly ran toward Ad. Auntie. Adise knelt. What is it? The little girl smiled brightly. My teacher says I'll become a doctor because of the new school. Ad hugged her gently. I believe you will. The little girl ran back toward her friends. Ethan smiled. You've inspired them. Ad shook her head. No. Hope inspired them. A few days later, Ethan accompanied Adise to the market. Old habits had not disappeared. Although she no longer needed to sell fish for survival, she still visited the market every week. Many traders welcomed her warmly. One elderly woman laughed. "Our billionaire's wife still remembers us." Adise smiled. "I'll always remember you." She purchased vegetables from small traders instead of large suppliers. She stopped at nearly every stall. She asked about families. She remembered children's names. She visited elderly widows. Nothing about her attitude had changed. As they prepared to leave, Ethan noticed Chidinma quietly arranging tomatoes at a small table. Business seemed slow. Adise walked over. "How are sales?" Chadma forced a smile. "They'll improve." Adise looked carefully. "You don't have enough customers." She turned to Ethan. "I have an idea." The following week, Williams Global Hotels signed a contract purchasing fresh vegetables exclusively from women farmers in the village. Dozens of women suddenly had guaranteed buyers. Among them was Chidinma when she received the first payment. Tears filled her eyes. She hurried to Ad's house. "I don't know how to thank you." Adise smiled. "You don't have to. I treated you terribly. I know. And you still helped me." Adise gently held her hand. "If kindness only belonged to people who deserve it, none of us would ever receive it." Chidinma cried openly. From that day onward, she became one of Ad's closest friends. Several months passed. The village transformed dramatically. The new school welcomed hundreds of students. The medical center opened its doors. Expectant mothers no longer traveled dangerous distances for treatment. The Clean Water Project eliminated many diseases caused by contaminated river water. Streetlights illuminated roads at night for the first time. Most importantly, the fish processing factory officially opened. Instead of selling raw fish cheaply, fishermen now processed, packaged, and exported their products. Household incomes doubled. Some families earned 3 times what they once did. Young people stopped leaving the village in search of work. Opportunities had finally come home. On the day the factory officially opened, Ethan stood before hundreds of villagers. He smiled proudly. "This building doesn't belong to me. It belongs to every hard-working fisherman and fisherwoman here." The crowd applauded. Then he surprised everyone. "I'd like someone else to cut the ribbon." People expected him to call a government official or perhaps Chief Okoro. Instead, he turned toward Ad, "My wife." The crowd erupted into cheers. Ade looked embarrassed. "Ethan, you built this dream long before I arrived." She slowly accepted the ribbon-cutting scissors. Before cutting the ribbon, she looked at the crowd. "I grew up believing poverty meant we had nothing." She smiled gently. "But poverty never stopped us from loving one another. It never stopped us from sharing food. It never stopped us from helping neighbors." She looked toward the fishermen. "Now we have opportunities. Let's never lose our kindness while gaining prosperity." Everyone applauded loudly. She cut the ribbon. The factory officially opened. That evening, Chief Okoro visited Ethan and Ad. He carried an old wooden box. "I've kept this for many years." He handed it to Ad. Curiously, she opened it. Inside lay an old fishing hook, carefully wrapped in cloth. Tears immediately filled her eyes. "My father's." The chief nodded. "We found it among his belongings after the storm. I intended to return it long ago. I kept postponing." He lowered his head, perhaps because I was ashamed. Ad gently picked up the hook. Memories flooded back. Her father teaching her to fish. His laughter, his encouragement, his belief in her. She wiped away tears. "He always believed I could succeed." Chief Okoro smiled warmly. He was right. As the months turned into a year, the village became almost unrecognizable. Visitors arrived not because of gossip. They came to study the remarkable transformation. University researchers documented the cooperative fishing model. Government officials praised the community's development. Neighboring villages asked for advice. Yet one thing never changed. Every Saturday morning before sunrise, Aiden still paddled the same old canoe across the river, although they now owned luxury boats, private helicopters, and countless vehicles. Adise refused to abandon the canoe her father had built. One peaceful morning, Ethan looked around the calm river. "Do you ever miss our old life?" She smiled thoughtfully. "I don't." "You don't." "I miss the struggles." He looked surprised. "The struggles. They taught me gratitude." She reached over and gently squeezed his hand. "If life had always been easy, I might never have become the woman you fell in love with." He smiled warmly. "And if my life had always been comfortable, I might never have learned what truly matters." Together they watched the sunrise paint the river with brilliant shades of gold. The same river that had once carried a lonely fisherwoman through years of hardship now reflected a future filled with hope, not just for her, but for an entire community. The girl who had once been mocked for her rough hands had become a symbol of compassion. The billionaire who once feared every relationship had found genuine love where he least expected it, and together they had proven that the greatest measure of wealth is not the money a person keeps, but the lives they choose to lift along the way. 5 years passed. The little fishing village that had once been known only for its quiet river and struggling fishermen had become one of the most admired communities in the country. The dusty roads that had turned into thick mud every rainy season were now smooth and well paved. The small leaking school where children once squeezed onto broken benches had grown into a modern educational campus filled with bright classrooms, libraries, science laboratories, and computer centers. The tiny clinic that could barely treat a fever had become a fully equipped medical center serving neighboring communities. The fish processing factory exported products across Africa and beyond, providing steady income for hundreds of families. Most importantly, something far greater than buildings had changed. The hearts of the people had changed. The same villagers who once judged people by appearances had learned to value kindness, honesty, and hard work above beauty or wealth. Every visitor who entered the village noticed something different. People smiled more. Neighbors helped one another. Children greeted elders respectfully. Young men no longer laughed at hardworking women. Young girls grew up believing they could become anything they dreamed of becoming. And at the center of that remarkable transformation stood one woman, Adise Williams. Although the world now knew her as the wife of billionaire Ethan Williams, those who truly knew her understood something important. She had never allowed wealth to change her. She still woke before sunrise. She still enjoyed paddling her father's old canoe across the river every Saturday morning. She still preferred simple meals made by her mother. She still visited widows every week without informing reporters or photographers. Whenever journalists asked why she continued living so simply, despite having unimaginable wealth, she always smiled and answered the same way. "My bank account changed. My heart didn't." That simple sentence became famous across the country. Many people quoted it in newspapers, speeches, and even school textbooks. One bright Saturday morning, Adise stood outside her beautiful home overlooking the river. Unlike many mansions owned by billionaires, their house blended naturally into the village. It was elegant but not extravagant. A large veranda overlooked the water where her old canoe remained carefully preserved. Fresh flowers surrounded the compound. Children often gathered outside simply because they knew AD would always greet them warmly. That morning, Ethan walked onto the veranda carrying 2 cups of tea. "I knew I'd find you here," she smiled. "I was watching the sunrise." He handed her one of the cups. "You've watched this sunrise thousands of times. I know it never gets old." He followed her gaze toward the river. "Neither does this view." They stood quietly together. After several peaceful moments, Ethan spoke. "Do you know what today is?" She smiled mischievously. "Of course. Our anniversary," he laughed. "I was testing you. I never forget important dates." "I've noticed." Later that morning, a convoy of school buses entered the village. Dozens of children climbed out excitedly. Their teachers gathered them together before approaching Ethan and Ad. One teacher smiled. "Good morning." "Good morning. We've brought our students here." Adise looked surprised. "Why?" The teacher smiled warmly. "They're studying people who changed communities through compassion. We wanted them to meet you." Adise looked slightly embarrassed. "I'm just an ordinary woman." One little boy immediately raised his hand. "My teacher says ordinary people don't change thousands of lives." Everyone laughed softly. Adise knelt beside him. "What is your name?" "David." "What do you want to become when you grow up?" "A doctor?" She smiled. "Then work hard. Maybe one day you'll change even more lives than I have." The boy nodded eagerly. "I will." The children toured the village throughout the afternoon. They visited the school, the medical center, the fish processing factory, the clean water system. Finally, they gathered beneath the enormous mango tree where Ethan and Ad often met villagers. One curious little girl raised her hand. "Auntie Ad?" "Yes. My teacher said people used to laugh at you." Adise smiled gently. "They did? Why?" "They thought I looked different." The little girl frowned. "Did that make you angry?" Adise thought carefully before answering. "Sometimes it made me sad. But not angry." "Why?" Because angry hearts eventually become like the people who hurt them. The children listened attentively. She continued, I decided something instead. What? I decided to become kinder than the cruelty I received. The teacher quietly wiped away tears. So did several parents standing nearby. That evening, the village gathered to celebrate the 5th anniversary of Ethan and Ad's wedding. The entire community attended. Traditional dancers performed. Children sang songs they had written about kindness and perseverance. The atmosphere felt joyful. During the celebration, Chief Okoro slowly walked onto the stage. His hair had become much whiter over the years. He leaned on a carved walking stick. The crowd immediately became silent. My people, his voice remained strong despite his age. 5 years ago, this village received the greatest lesson in its history. He looked toward Ad. We judged a young woman by the strength of her arms. We never noticed the strength of her heart. He turned toward the younger generation seated before him. I don't want any child growing up here to repeat our mistake. The children nodded. Chief Okoro smiled gently. I've spoken with our village council. Everyone waited quietly. We have unanimously agreed. He paused dramatically. To build a monument. Whispers spread across the crowd. He continued, not because Adari a billionaire. He shook his head firmly. That is not why. We honor her because she remained kind when people were cruel. She remained humble after becoming wealthy. And she taught us that appearances can deceive us. The audience erupted into applause. Several months later, the monument was completed. It stood at the entrance of the village where every visitor would see it immediately. Unlike ordinary statues, this one did not show Adering expensive clothes or jewelry. Instead, the sculptor had recreated the image everyone remembered. Ade carrying a basket of fresh fish on her head, her rough hands gripping the basket firmly, her face wearing the same gentle smile she had always carried. Beside the statue stood a polished stone engraved with these words, Never judge people by their appearance, their occupation, or their circumstances. Character is the greatest beauty a person can possess. Visitors often stopped to read the inscription. Many left deeply moved. Some even cried. Not everyone who returned to the village came as a tourist. One afternoon, a luxury car stopped outside Ethan and Ad's home. A well-dressed woman stepped out nervously. She looked familiar, very familiar. It was Isabella, the woman who had once broken Ethan's heart years earlier. She had changed. The confidence that once defined her had disappeared. She approached slowly. Ethan recognized her immediately. Hello, Isabella. She smiled awkwardly. It's been a long time. It has. Adise welcomed her politely. Please come inside. Over tea. Isabella finally spoke. I owe both of you an apology. Neither interrupted. She continued. I spent my youth chasing wealth. I believed money guaranteed happiness. She lowered her eyes. I was wrong. She looked toward Ad. I've read your story. I wanted to meet the woman who taught an entire country what real beauty looks like. Adise smiled kindly. We're all still learning. Isabella nodded. I certainly am. She left shortly afterward, carrying something far more valuable than she had arrived, seeking peace. A few weeks later, Ethan accompanied Ad to the river before sunrise. The old canoe still floated exactly where it always had. He smiled. I think this canoe deserves a museum. Adise laughed. It belongs on the river. They climbed inside together. The water remained calm. The morning air felt cool against their faces. After paddling for several minutes, Ethan looked toward her. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if your father hadn't taught you to fish? She smiled thoughtfully. Sometimes. What do you think? I think. She paused. God uses ordinary paths to lead us toward extraordinary destinations. He nodded slowly. If you hadn't become a fisherwoman, you wouldn't have been on that muddy road. She smiled. And if your truck hadn't become stuck, you would have driven past. They both laughed. A broken road changed our lives. No. She gently corrected him. A kind decision did. Later that year, Ethan and Ad established the AD Foundation, dedicated to supporting hardworking women across rural communities. The foundation provided fishing equipment, farming tools, scholarships, and small business loans. Thousands of women benefited. Whenever recipients thanked Adise, she always gave the same advice. Don't wait until you're rich to help someone. Kindness costs far less than money. Her words inspired countless others. Soon, volunteers from different parts of the country joined the foundation. Its impact spread far beyond the fishing village. One peaceful evening, Ethan and Ad sat beneath the same giant mango tree where they had shared so many conversations years earlier. The tree had grown taller. Its branches stretched wider across the sky. Children played nearby. Some of them had never known the village before it changed. One little girl ran toward Ad. "Auntie." "Yes. My grandmother says everyone used to laugh at you." Adise smiled. "They did." The little girl looked confused. "But why? You look beautiful." Adise gently stroked her hair. "My dear, sometimes people only see with their eyes. They forget to see with their hearts." The little girl thought carefully before smiling. "I'll always use my heart." Adise hugged her warmly. "I believe you will." That night, after the celebration ended and stars filled the sky, Ethan and Adise walked slowly toward the river one last time. The village had grown quiet, and the moon cast a silver path across the calm water. When Ethan reached for her hand, she smiled. "Do you remember what you told me the day we met?" he asked. Adise laughed softly. "I told you to leave before the road became worse, and you refused my money?" She nodded. "I couldn't charge someone for doing the right thing." Ethan looked at her with the same admiration he had felt years earlier beside that muddy road. "I spent so long searching for true love in glamorous places. I attended exclusive parties, traveled across countries, and met women who knew my fortune before they knew my heart." He squeezed her hand. "Then I found everything I was searching for beside a broken road." Happy tears filled Adise's eyes. "And I spent years believing no man would ever love a muscular fisherwoman like me. I found love when I stopped hoping someone would admire my appearance and simply continued being myself." They stood together in silence as the river moved gently before them. It was the same river that had witnessed Adise's loneliness, grief, and struggle. But now it reflected a life filled with purpose, family, and joy. The village that once mocked the poor fisherwoman had become living proof of what compassion could change. People later traveled from across the country to hear how a billionaire had fallen in love with a village woman. But they left with a lesson far greater than romance. Kindness is more powerful than beauty. Humility shines brighter than wealth. Honest work carries greater dignity than pride. And no one should ever be judged by appearance, occupation, or circumstance. The world had once overlooked Adise, but Ethan saw the treasure hidden inside her heart. And through courage, kindness, and the strength to remain herself, the fisherwoman changed not only her destiny, but the future of everyone around her.